Welcome to 21 This Week. I'm Susan Heltemes filling in for Casey Aiken, who's attending his college reunion this weekend at Colgate. This week, more name headaches for Dan Snyder and his football team. Montgomery County piggyback tax could be in the lurch and less than a month until the primary. Political junkies, listen up as we parse the race's winners and losers. Joining us today to discuss this and more is a panel of political observers to share their insight. Democratic business owner Sam Statland, Republican activist Jerry Cave, past chair of the Montgomery County Republican Party Mark Uncapher, and finally, Elbridge James, chair of the Progressive Maryland Board of Directors. Please come back right after this short break for more 21 This Week. Drumbeat is intensifying for Dan Snyder and his Washington football team to change names. This week, the National Congress of American Indians and the United Nations sent letters to more than 2,700 NFL players requesting them to speak up out against a name that does not honor people of color. Instead, it seeks to conceal a horrible segment of American history and the countless atrocities suffered by Native Americans. Elbridge, up until now, the players haven't been asked to take part in the debate. In comparing the lack of action by the NFL as opposed to the NBA's swift handling of the Clippers fiasco, former Seattle Seahawks quarterback Richard Sherman was quoted as saying that the NFL, unlike the NBA, is more of a bottom line league. If it doesn't affect their bottom line, they're not concerned. Now, Elbridge, should the players become engaged, and will their status as role models in their communities make a difference?
There were two things. Number one, the NBA players didn't wait to be asked. They leaped forward and said what they had to say. And number two, Sherman is out in the West Coast where there are more active participation with Native Americans. The Redskins, the Eagles, the Giants, anybody on the East Coast does not have or is familiar with Native American issues and concerns. He's correct. It's a bottom line, and a lot of the players are concerned about where their next paycheck is coming. No guaranteed contracts. And so they're really worried about, some of the issues that the owners might bring up in terms of letting them go. But the fact is, it's a civil and human right, and they need to have more discussion. I think these things can be more moderated and mitigated and managed out if, in fact, there's more dialogue.
Okay. Now, Jerry, the team continues to assert that the team name came about as a tribute to honor the team's Indian coach William Lone Star Dietz in 1933, when the team, based in Boston, decided to change the Braves name to avoid confusion with a professional baseball team, also named the Braves. This week, a 1933 newspaper article surfaced that quotes then owner George Preston Marshall, stating, "The fact that we have in our head coach Lone Star Dietz an Indian, together with several Indian players, has not, as may be suspected, inspired me to select the name Redskins. He apparently chose the name to keep the Native American logo." How will this discovery affect the debate?
Not one iota, but what's really important is this is brilliant political theater by the Democrats for a couple of reasons. Number one, they can distract the country from the horrible policy of Democrats. Number two, they can format that this country is still horribly racist and they need to support Democrats. But number three, it's really, really racist. Because what they're saying is you can't name a team after a minority like Seminoles or Sioux or even Redskins because they can't take it. But it's okay to say Notre Dame is the Fighting Irish, which is much more of a pejorative, or to say the Minnesota Vikings is okay when the Vikings were the scourge of Europe for hundreds of years doing horrible things. You don't see the Irish caring, you don't see the Scandinavians up in arms. This is a completely manufactured thing, and it is brilliant political street theater by the Democrats, but it is the poison of political correctness creeping into our culture, and it is nothing but stupid and immaterial.
Only Jerry could blame the Democrats for this. Okay, Sam, now, Dan Snyder tried to improve his image a while back by starting a foundation to help Native Americans and bought winter clothes and some other items needed by several tribes. Their effort was met with cynicism, to say the least. And on Thursday afternoon, the team sent out a tweet to fans in response to a letter signed by Senate Leader Harry Reid and 49 other senators asking for a name change. The tweet asked team fans to tweet Senator Reid to show your Redskins pride and tell him what the team means to you. This proved to be a marketing disaster as fans overwhelmingly tweeted Senator Reid with their distaste for the name. Snyder doesn't seem to know his fans. So, Sam, is he going to quickly give up the name, or is the NFL going to force him to do it?
There's a little bit of truth in what Jerry says. This really could be viewed as a political scheme by the Democrats. But I want you to know, as a Democratic businessman, I have, which is my label this week, I have a different twist to this. I really think that the Redskins should be renamed the Indians, because I like the idea of the Cowboys playing the Indians. And furthermore, by using the name Indian, we can add in the Southeast Asian Indians, you see, and Indians who would both support and buy more Redskin stuff, giving Mr. Snyder more publicity, and he'd make more money. And I must tell you that a lot of Republicans also said they should change the name, because those in Congress have never been in business in their life.
Susan, could I pick up a little bit
Yes.
on this this Senate letter? This was a letter from 50 Democrats. Now, there won't be 50 Democrats in the Senate come next January. And one of the reasons is this is where they're putting their political capital. An issue that has no consequence, no harm, has no impact. And instead of the VA scandal or any number of public policy issues that really affect people's lives, this is what they're paying attention to.
Well,
that the Redskins should change their name.
This is a ridiculous discussion. Can we move on?
Sam came up with a great idea, because just think of the away games in the Punjab or in New Delhi. There's 1.2 billion people that live in India.
Marketing.
Talk about a way to expand your fan base.
And I want to just respond to what Mark said, in that Senator McCain was disappointed that he wasn't asked to sign the original letter, and they are expanding the letter to include many Republicans.
But both
Mark.
senators, interestingly enough, I went to school with Mark Warner in college, and he's a lot of things, but he's no dummy. Both senators from Virginia declined to sign the letter.
But Mark Warner in the press yesterday said that it needs to be looked at and examined carefully.
And that's why he's a very smart guy, because that's a non-answer.
And let's explain this. Remember this. The Lone Ranger and Tonto, right?
Yeah.
You don't call anybody Tonto anymore, because that is a derogatory. And so you do not.
Well, I just want to throw out again, which I've said before.
Think
grew
about
up,
how they called the poor ranger lonely.
Yeah.
You know what, though?
How do you get the Lone Ranger? He had a good buddy
In
with him.
Minnesota, where there are a lot of Native Americans, if you would go into a bar and yell out Redskins, you would be beaten to a pulp. It is derogatory in many parts of this country.
Isn't that where they have a lot of those Scandinavians that were the descendants of those horrible Vikings, pillaging and raping their way through Europe for hundreds of years? How can they live with that
My
stain?
English ancestors didn't think so nicely about
Well,
those
who knows?
Vikings.
The
But the Vikings aren't in
maybe-
England. They're just not a team in England
I
called the
think
Vikings.
in political correctness, I must admit that my folks came from Kiev in the Ukraine, and we trust our
Established by-
lineage back to the Vikings. And my wife is a Vikings fan.
I know, and so
she has
am
very
I.
good
The Vikings established Kiev.
Exactly.
But the name of
Could
the
we move on?
Washington team deals with
They
the
do this
color
with
of
everything.
the
They've done it
skin.
with the Seminoles, the Florida State Seminoles. What could possibly be degrading
Well-
about naming the team after a tribe that came from that era?
Okay, it's time
it's-
to go on. This is not going to be over. We're going to be talking about this again, I know.
And
So
that's
on
sad.
Tuesday of this week, the Supreme Court agreed to hear a Maryland case that could cost Montgomery County millions of dollars. Mark, the state of Maryland allows residents to deduct income tax paid to other states on their Maryland taxes. But, this is the big but, the deductions are not given on the taxes Maryland collects on behalf of counties and municipalities referred to as piggyback taxes. The Maryland court ruled last year that such an arrangement is a violation of the U.S. Commerce Clause. It could cost Montgomery County a lot of money, as much as $150 million in past claims and additional loss of $25 million a year. Should the Supreme Court uphold the state ruling?
Sure, and I was actually surprised they took the case and didn't let the Maryland case stand. I was also frankly surprised that Montgomery County was doing this or being permitted to do this by the state. It would be seems to be a very clear violation of the Commerce Clause. We don't allow jurisdictions to tax people twice. We allow that to be parsed out, and so in a national economy, that's the appropriate response.
Well, Sam, County Executive Leggett chose to set aside immediately $15.7 million in his budget just in case the court ruling changes revenues collected but the county council opted to spend the money anyway. So what's going to happen here in the county if this revenue stream is cut?
I think Ike was very wise to set aside a reserve, and the county council was very foolish to spend the money, especially when you have a Supreme Court that's going to make a decision. So what will happen is two things. The first thing that's going to happen is that it will make actually the state of Maryland and Montgomery County more competitive to our high wage earners, who are the people that are not allowed the deduction currently in Montgomery County. And these people might not be moving to other states like Delaware and Florida and Georgia and Pennsylvania, so the tax base actually might increase. Worst comes to worst.
That's a big might.
The worst comes to worst, I'm sure our county council, led by Roger Berliner, will have no problem in reducing everybody's income by 1% to make up the difference.
Well, I just think the county council is emulating state legislature, because they were supposed to set aside money for the pensions and they spent it. They were supposed to set aside money for highway construction and they spent it.
But
then they just raised other taxes.
Jerry, what will Montgomery County do? That could be a really big hit in terms of a revenue stream.
Well, this is a very personal issue for me, and I just hope the decision doesn't come down until my house sells first.
Elbridge, what do you think about this?
My point is that I agree with, in fact, I did the right thing by setting money aside. Other concern I say, and this flips over into our dependency on gambling revenue. I have a real big concern about that, because in fact we need to have an adequate tax base that's fair to all business as well as private enterprise, private persons, and we need to have a base that supports our needs in this county. And they need to look at it and not depend on other revenue streams that are inappropriate or going to found to be violating different codes.
Well, this is going to be most interesting, and it's going to be a real hit for the county. You're talking $15 million.
Yes.
Maybe this is the kind of thing that will propel Heather Mazur into the governor's mansion, where she can then legalize drugs to make money.
On that news,
but they have a
stay
name
tuned
for people
more
like that.
21
They're called
this
drug
week, right after
dealers.
this message. Everyone has a favorite race they're following, as we are now only 2 weeks away from early voting in this primary season. I've asked each panelist to pick any race that has piqued their interest and to explain why the race is important and to predict who will triumph on June 24th. Jerry, let's begin with you.
I think Maryland risks a real problem by besmirching their reputation if they nominate Brian Frosh for Attorney General. He's not only the most arrogant opponent of the Constitution by his unreasonable opposition to the Second Amendment, but much, much worse than that, he is on record as voting against Jessica's law and the advocates for that law, who are the parents of murdered children. He treated them, in their own words, in a demeaning manner, and worse than they'd ever been treated in front of any committee of any legislature in the state, and any state in the United States. I can see Bill O'Reilly now, but it will besmirch the entire reputation of our state, and I'm afraid that might happen.
Sam, you're up next.
Folks, let's talk about this for a second. Here in Montgomery County, the Board of Elections is predicting a 15 to 20% voter turnout. That's 150 to maybe 200,000 people that are going to vote in this election. That is an abysmally low number. That means down ballot in a House of Delegates races, for example, a person's going to get elected at 6 to 7,000 votes. But more importantly, we have 7 ballot issues, some of them very important, and I had to make notes to keep them straight. Ballot question 3, the removal of elected officials who have been convicted of a crime. They're going to be suspended if found guilty and removed at time of
This
sentencing.
is in the general
Folks,
election.
this is in the election.
General election.
But the point is that with such a small number of people making this kind of a decision, the election takes place in the Democratic primary of elected officials. So I want to start early getting people focusing on coming and voting, because that type of a decision affects everyone statewide. We also have the issue of education for minority children who are not citizens, whether or not they're going to be allowed to attend schools and get a tax break.
Okay, well, that
We're
you
gonna
did.
also-
No.
We've
2
got 9
minutes
minutes.
is up. Elbridge, we'll come back to you.
No.
Elbridge, what race are you watching? And I would love a race here. Everybody's skirting the issue. What race are you watching?
Well, I want to disagree with my colleague. I'm supporting Brian Frost. I believe he will, in fact, win that race and do well for the state of Maryland. In his legislative capacity, he has been very fair with all of his advocates that come down and have our own issues that we need to have addressed. He is, in fact, and he wanted to work with folks to, in fact, explain how things need to be modified so, in fact, legislation can be passed which benefits everyone. Now, I can't help when parties decide it's either all or nothing, but I'm like a person that looks at all sides of the issue, consults other folks, and then tries to put forth an agenda or decisions that are for the best interest of the state of Maryland. That's why I like Brian
The
Frost.
problem with Brian Frost is that he goes on the air and he claims to be the Attorney General of the people.
Wait, Sam,
but when you
first-
actually see him in committee and pigeonholing legislation, for example, on
Sam,
all
we've
of our
got to
primary
let Mark
healthcare
speak
groups.
first. Mark, you're last but
He's
not
just a
least. What
negative.
race are
I
you
agree with
watching?
Jerry.
I might just let Sam go
No.
on and continue.
Mark,
but
I
am-
concede my time to my colleague
Jerry,
across there.
What race are you
I am
watching?
watching the Senate race in District 14, and the Republican candidate who's running in the fall, Franklin Delano Howard, has a business experience, who really understands the competitive issues that the state is that the county has faced, running against Karen Montgomery. Now, Karen Montgomery won a primary 4 years ago against Rona Kramer. Montgomery is frankly far to the left of the Democratic Party. She, for example, opposed the tax reduction that was a bipartisan consensus in the legislature because she was worried about losing the money to spend for programs. We need somebody like Frank Howard in the Senate, and this is a district, if the way you look at the way the lines, is probably one of the more competitive districts in the county. So I'm looking forward to seeing Frank Howard as a Republican senator from Montgomery County.
Does
Look
anybody?
for snow in August, too.
It will snow in August. Okay. Well, what I wanted, nobody talked about actual races in the primary.
Let's talk about the District 20 race.
Okay.
In District 20, first of all, I don't know what the Gazette editorial board was doing, as mentioned by the Post. How in the world could you, A, not endorse Sheila Hickson, who's a committee chairwoman? The last time we lost a committee chairwoman from Montgomery County, or a chairperson, was when Larry Levitan was running for office, and a lot of people will say it's because Larry really didn't run for that office. We can't afford to lose somebody like Sheila Hickson. And in District 20, there is not another woman in the race.
And there are 10
what the
men,
heck
I
is
believe.
going on in District 20? Why would we lose somebody like Sheila Hickson? And in the county council race, we have District 1 against, in Council 1, we have Roger Berliner going against Dutchie Trachtenberg. Now, I must admit that the incumbents sticking together are supporting Roger. However, I think Dutchie is a much more balanced person. She's not afraid to speak her mind, even to go at odds against public unions, which may be very, very important because of the Supreme Court ruling that we were talking about. We need an independent thinker there.
Except she is warmly endorsed this time by the unions.
Well, she was endorsed warmly by Gino Rennan McGeo, and in that endorsement, they both said they were putting bygones aside, tried to work together for the benefit of the county. And I'm going to take Gino at his word, and I'm going to take Dutchie at her word, and I'd like to see what they can do. In the District 18 race, we have two incumbents. We have Carr and Gutierrez, who
And Walt Stryker, we have three.
and Walt Stryker, but I want to focus on Gutierrez and I want to focus on Carr. Carr, in 7 years, has not had one piece of legislation passed. Not one. And Gutierrez has not had one piece of legislation passed. How these people can be endorsed by the Post and be endorsed by the Get is beyond me. I think that the Gazette editorial board probably was taking advantage of Maryland's marijuana law early.
Okay,
when they
on
made
that
decision.
note,
So,
We
I wanna
are
take-
running
let me
out of
respond
time.
to that.
We'll be right back in a
Okay.
moment with parting shots. You can. Now with parting shots. Sam, you're up first.
this week I received a phone call, and the phone call was a poll. It asked me what my age is and whether I was going to vote in the primary. And my answer, of course, is yes. Why? Because, folks, the vote, who is going to be our elected officials, takes place in the Democratic primary. We all have the responsibility to vote. We can't elect officials when only 15 to 20% of us show up. That's absolutely despicable. On June 3rd, you have until June 3rd to change your voter registration. And I'm very reluctant to tell people to change their voter registration. But the fact of the matter is, if you want to participate in politics here, then you need to go ahead, change your registration, and then vote for whoever you want in the general election. You guys need to vote.
Jerry, you're up next.
Maryland has a high-rated educational school system for three reasons. Number one, we got a lot of smart, well-educated, white-collar workers that have kids that are the same. Two, they juked the books. They cheated. But Louisiana is very impoverished, and they've done something pretty smart. Since after Hurricane Katrina, the state of Louisiana had to take over the schools in Orleans Parish that was run by the Democrats. And since they've done that, they've instituted more charter schools, and kids graduating from high school and performing at grade level are up 20%. Now, all of the school in Orleans Parish are doing that because Louisiana cares about the students and Maryland cares about the teachers' union. Not teacher, the teachers' union.
Mark, you're up next.
I'd like to, one of the issues that we didn't have a chance to talk about tonight is the issue of the veterans scandal. And there's a particular Maryland aspect to it, which is that the Baltimore Center that serves the 500,000 veterans in this state has one of the worst performance record of the 60 centers in the country. And I can tell you from experience with my son, who got out of the Marines and was injured when he came out, he never got an appointment. He tried. I drove him up to Baltimore. He tried the numbers. He tried again and again. This is an issue that affects people in a personal way, their personal lives, and the record in Maryland is a disgrace.
Elbridge, now it's your turn.
I kind of want to agree about the Veterans Administration. It's been a 20-year problem, and it's gotten worse in the last 10 years. In fact, 10 to 15 years, it has gotten worse. This is not a Democrat or Republican problem. It is, in fact, a governance problem. And to have our citizens be at the mercy of incompetent and sometimes corrupt lower and mid-level officials is disgraceful. I expect the Obama administration to get in and clean it up. If it were the Bush administration where the problem occurred also, I still would expect them to get in and clean it up. This is not a Democrat or Republican. This is a United States scandal.
Okay, I want to thank you all, panel, for helping us out tonight. I want to thank you for joining us this week. And we look forward to seeing you again next week for Montgomery County's hardest hitting political talk show. Until then, you can follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, or watch us on YouTube. For 21 This Week, I'm Susan Heltemes. Bye for now.